Hey guys, I wanted to make a really brief video on how to use Anki. The goal of this is just kind of an introduction to get you up to speed so that you don't have to go all over the internet and watch a ton of videos to use it at its basic level. The first thing that I want to say is you should watch this in pretty much everything on double speed if you can. You can probably understand this a lot faster than I can say it. My 1 minute elevator pitch for why to use Anki is this image right here. I think that sums it up pretty well. So the first thing you're going to notice is that my Anki screen looks a lot different than yours. This is because of a lot of the add-ons that I've added to this. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you have the most recent version of Anki on. So go here, go to About Anki, and then you want at least 2.1.20 or later. That's because of some like very fundamental things that are different about the filtered decks and the V2 scheduler. So just make sure you're up to date. The next thing I'm going to show you how to do is to add add-ons. So you go to Tools, Add-ons, and then Get Add-ons, and then there's I don't know, like an 8-digit code that you type in, and just click OK, and then it automatically downloads the add-ons. So when you have a minute, I want you to go ahead, and I would recommend downloading all of these highly recommended ones, because some of these are just so like integral to Anki and my experience with Anki that I don't know like how to use it without them. There's some optional ones like the kill streaks and stuff that makes it more fun, but I would say go ahead and download these ones. The next thing you're going to want to do is make sure to download a deck. The one I recommend is Anking. You can find my reasons for that in the secondary resources document on the Google Drive. I think it's the best. There's a lot of people updating it. It's got the most connections to outside resources. And you might want to download a U of L specific deck too, because some of the stuff in class is not covered on step 1. So you want to just kind of keep up with both of those. Another thing to note is that the Anking has a step 2 as well as a step 1 deck. So the step 1 part of the decks is the Zonky step decks, the Pharmacology, and the LOL Nauticop. The Cheesy Dorian in step 2 is part of the step 2 deck. So you'll have to split those up a little bit. The next thing I want to get into is kind of some terminology of Anki. So you see these two cards here highlighted in yellow, kind of green. They both say the same thing on this sort field. That's because they're both part of the same note. And what I mean by note is this entire thing I've highlighted here. You can see each one of these brackets here. Those are called closed deletions. And so the C1 makes a card. The C2 makes a second card. They are on the same note though. So notes and cards are treated differently. So, you know, if you have a ton of closed deletions in the note, you can have multiple cards, but this is the difference between notes and cards. Another thing that I want to talk about is the difference between learning cards, new cards, reviewed cards. So the first thing you should do in the deck is you should go into the browse menu and you should select the entire deck and then suspend the entire thing. I'm not going to do that because I've been unsuspending cards as I go through and learn them in class or whatever. So, but you can see most of my cards here are suspended. So what I do is I go through and unsuspend cards as we cover them in class. Like if we talk about the embryology of the heart, I'll unsuspend those cards and do them once we've covered them in class. So for this, new cards are cards that you've never seen before, so they're new. Learning cards are cards that you have seen before, but they haven't gotten to their graduating interval yet, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. Review cards are cards that have passed their graduating interval. Mature cards have an interval of greater than 21 days. Young cards are less than that. And so the next thing kind of to do is to show you the different kinds of settings. So that's under options, and the steps are how how many minutes it'll take you to see that card again. So if I get it wrong, I'll see this card again in 25 minutes. If I get it right, I'll see it again in 1 day, which is 1,440 minutes. And then if I get it right again, I'll see it in 3 days, which is this 4,000 number. You want to have the max new cards per day. I recommend only doing about 100 per day and try to be consistent with it. 100 max. If you do more than that a day, you really get bogged down in the learning cards. So the graduating interval that I talked about is the interval 7 days that you'll see after this last one. And once you pass the graduating interval, the card has been learned. And after that, it'll affect the ease, which is just kind of a modifier for how often you see the card. So if the card is graduated, it's a learned card, and you get it wrong, the ease goes down, meaning that you'll see the card more often. And so there's kind of a couple ways you can go about the settings. I like to just see it one time on the first day, so I can just kind of get them into my out of my new cards and into my learning cards. But if you wanted, you could put, I don't know, 60 minutes here or 120 minutes here. If you want to see that in a couple hours, like later that evening, to make sure you really learned it. So that's just something to play around with to see as you like it. You want the maximum reviews to be 9,999, just because you need to do as many cards as it tells you to. You can copy these down if you like, as you see them. I got these from the Anki webpage. I modified them a little bit based on what I thought was best. But this is the most important part of Anki, so you really want to customize it to what you need. These are lapses, so when you get the card wrong after it's graduated, that counts as a lapse, and that decreases the ease a little bit, so you'll see it more often. One of the other things, there's a second part of the settings, and that's here in preferences. This is just about when the next day starts. The important part here is I recommend leaving this Anki 2.1 scheduler on. It changes a little bit about how Anki works, and I think it's super important and super helpful. Another thing that I forgot to mention is that when you lapse a card, it goes into what's called the relearning phase, which means that you need to get it right in these steps before it becomes a learned card again. So that just kind of changes the groups that these cards are in. One of the other important things that I want to mention is you should have some kind of maximum interval. Mine is set to 6 months right now because I don't want a card to go away because I keep getting it right. I don't want it to go away before after I take step 1. So set some kind of maximum interval here. I like 6 months. You can do 9 months or a little bit less, but you should play around with the Anki simulator that's on that Word document to see how that's actually going to affect your reviews. So next I'm going to show you how to search through some of the decks. The first thing I'm going to go over is just some search terms. So if you type in dog, it'll show up cards that have dog. If you type in dog cat, it'll show up cards that have both of those. If you type dog or cat, it'll show up cards with dog or cat in it. It's pulling up some of my on-king cards right now. And so those work like that. There's quotations for dog, cat to show exactly that phrase, which I don't have in here. You can see those on the how-to document. I have them outlined kind of towards the bottom. Some specific search terms. One of the most helpful things that I've found is typing is, new, and then this negative sign means is not, suspended. And so those will show you cards that you've specifically unsuspended but haven't done yet, meaning cards that are kind of on your backlog. And I think that's one of the most helpful search terms that I have. You can find some more on this document about like finding mature cards, finding cards that are due tomorrow or later this week, stuff like that. So when you're on the browser screen, one of the things that I wanted to point out is that in this due column, if there's a date here, that means it's due on a certain date. If there's brackets, parentheses around it, that means it's suspended. So that means this would be due June 15th, but I have it suspended because I don't want to do this card. If it says new and then a number, that's just the order that it's due as a new card. Those cards aren't technically due in the search term, but they're new. So this one is new and suspended. If there weren't parentheses here, it would be new and unsuspended. And so you can see what dates these are due, and you can search by specific dates or sort them to see how many cards you'll have on a certain day. If you type in prop due equals 1, that'll show you all the cards that are due tomorrow, and you can see more about that on the Google document that I made. Like I was talking about earlier about the difference between cards and notes, and I said these two are a note, and there's two cards within them. If you mark a card, you see they're highlighted in blue here. That's a specific thing called marking a card. You can see here. It tags every card within the note. But if I unmark these and then I flag only this one, say I want it to be the red flag, it won't flag the other two cards of that note. So that's just something that you can play around with. I use the flags to make filtered decks, which I'm going to talk about that right now. So as you're going through school, I've made these resource documents that outlines Boards and Beyond, Pathoma, some of the sketchy videos, and I've got them color coded. So like you see here, amyloidosis is on chapter 1 of Pathoma, but these other things we talked about were on chapter 2. So you could go in here and then open up this little sales tag, go here, go to Pathoma, chapter 1, amyloidosis, and then I could select all of these, make them all red, and then I can go to chapter 2, and then I could do all of everything in chapter 2, or I could go section by section as I do them, and that way, so if these are all red, then I type here flag 1 is red, and so all the cards that I've flagged as red will show up here, and that can help if they're under different sections. You can also find the flags like this, and it tells you what the search terms are. So when you're making a filtered deck, it's one of the add-ons that you need to download. So you go up here, go to edit, create filtered deck based on this search, and this is how I pretty much add all of my new cards, is from a filtered deck. I don't go through like the main Anki decks and sort through, because sometimes there's thousands of those and who knows what order they're in. So I think it's best to like learn the material, make a filtered deck on that material, and then learn them, get them out of the filtered deck, and then they go back into like circulation. So these are the default settings. You almost always want to get rid of this is due here and just be whatever search term you wanted. I usually set this to max, and then you can change these settings in any that you like. I like to put them in random. So the next important thing here is rescheduled cards based on my answers in this deck. So this is the difference between if you want to use filtered decks to add new cards, or if you want to use it to cram old material. If you want to use this to cram like the day before an exam, and you don't want this to affect your cards, because you might just hit them wrong a bunch of times to see it over and over. So if you don't want this to affect your actual deck, you want this unchecked. And then this is just repeat failed cards. This is like the wrong step. For new cards, you want this selected though, and then you'll click build, and then it wants me to stop editing things. So now you see it here, filtered deck 1. And so what I do is I have a filtered deck that I made from create deck, and so like I have a bunch of biochemistry filtered decks, and so I just go through them like that. And there used to be 100 cards in here. There's none now because I finished it. I need to go ahead and delete it. And so what happens is when you do these cards, once they're finished with the intervals that the deck says, they pop back into the OnKing. So all of my filtered cards from these sections have jumped back into the OnKing now that they're learned. So next, I want to talk about reviewing cards that you've done before. What I like to do, you can see here that the Anki step decks are broken down into systems. And so instead of like doing my 3 Hem-Onc cards and then my 2 immunology cards, what I think is best to do is to just open up the OnKing deck the entire thing and then just do the reviews that way. Because with the V2 scheduler, it'll automatically randomize your decks, and so it won't just do hemonc and then immunology and then public health. It'll do like one card here, two cards here, one card there. And that helps for like in-house exams and for step one, because they're going to be randomized, so you're not going to be able to really be primed for what to expect. So now I want to show you guys just actually reviewing the cards. So, study now, and then I want to talk about the different buttons. So good is if you got the card right, you just hit good. It doesn't affect the ease of the card. Again, if you got the card wrong, and if it's a new card, sometimes I'll hit again 20 times before I get it right, and sometimes it'll stay in my filtered decks and I'll keep getting it wrong for a long time before it goes. The hard and easy buttons, don't overthink it. If you thought the card was easy, hit easy. If you thought the card was hard, hit hard. I would still say that 95% of my button presses are good or again, and hard is just if you do the card, or like, you just had a brain fart, and easy is if you just like hardly ever want to see that card again because it was so easy. So just kind of go about it like that. Sometimes you'll read a card and you'll misread the information on the card, and so you'll answer it wrong, but you actually knew it. So what I'll do sometimes then is I will bury the card, which means that it'll pop up again tomorrow. Try not to be too liberal with that, because you don't want to lie to yourself and be like, oh, I didn't get that wrong, I just need to bury it, I'll get it right tomorrow. The other thing is, if you come across a card that you haven't seen before, you can suspend it too. And in this section you can flag cards. So like what I'll do is if I think a card needs more pictures on it or some kind of memory hook, I'll flag it green. If I think it's super easy and I may never want to come back to that card again, I'll flag it blue. You can do that however you like. The next thing I want to talk about is that it's okay to get cards wrong. That's kind of the goal. You want to aim for around 90% retention. You can see here 90% plus or minus 5% is good. If you're too much higher or too much lower than that, you're either doing the cards wrong or lying to yourself about how wrong or right you are. So don't beat yourself up about getting cards wrong. That's the point. It's going to show you the cards that you need to see more often so that you don't forget it when it actually matters. One of the other good things to try to do is to try to change the window size and the font size. You won't really be able to tell here, but sometimes you can kind of memorize the shape of the card, and so you want to make sure that you're not doing that. So there are some add-ons that will randomize the font size. I think it's a little bit easier to just change the window size or do some reviews on your phone or a tablet. And in the On-King section, he writes notes in the purple section. So make sure that use those to kind of tie together the bigger picture. And then there's the lecture notes section here, missed questions, Pathoma, Boards and Beyond. All of these sections are safe to put your own notes in, meaning that when there's a new On-King update, this stuff won't be erased if you've made notes here. Everything else is liable to be erased, because that's where they'll add pictures from Sketchy or First Aid or their own On-King team notes. I make a ton of annotations on my cards when I'm doing this. There's usually something here to kind of tie together two different pictures, or just mnemonics that I made up, something to annotate those cards to make them a little more tied together better. On long days, because sometimes you'll have like 600, 800 cards to do, I use a Pomodoro timer to do 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, and that helps me do cards a lot faster. One more thing that I forgot to mention about the cards is you see that ... there for this is the closed deletion. If you edit the card and if you type in 2 colons, something after this, you can kind of give yourself a hint on the cards, and so whatever you typed in after that colon will show up there. I use this because some cards are just not made perfectly, and so you need to just get a prod in the right direction of like what are they actually asking about, so you can do this here. Just try not to do it too much because your brain will pick up on like what the answer is. It'll say, oh, hint in this card shape, this is the answer, but you want to make sure you're getting it on the content. The next thing I'm going to talk about is how to use Jordan's deck. So I'm going to try to add a Cade deck into this right now, but right now it's broken down into M1 Semester 2, which is MBLDD, and broken down into each of the exams. And so he has them kind of separated into biochemistry, pharmacology, physiology, all of the course rep topics. So what I'll do is, if we'll have the amino acids lecture, I'll go in here, browse, and then select all, and then unsuspend all of these cards, and then I'll just go through, and on the settings, that's why I like to have this in show new cards in order added, especially for Jordan's deck, because they're not broken down into super specific topics, but like, you know, if half of this lecture is from the first day and the other half is from the next day, you can just, you know, do the cards, answer the cards until you see something that you didn't know the answer for and haven't covered, and then you can just stop. You can do a similar thing with On King, but I think the filtered deck method is the best for On King, and just kind of going through in the order added for Jordan's is the best. So there's a couple things that you can do to try to make your settings harder if you think that it's not harder. I like to do new cards in order added. If you do it random order, it'll be a little bit harder. If you bury related new cards until the next day, you won't see the first card of a note. You won't see the second one on the same day that you saw the first one, so it'll split up related cards. You can also show new cards in random order. That is, I think that's on the main preferences. It's somewhere on here though. Yeah, show new cards. I like to do new cards after my reviews just because I know it, so I want to get the reviews out of the way. I wanted to go real quick into how to find some cards for Cade. If you go into the anatomy deck, the MSK, a lot of this deck will be fair game for stuff you cover in Cade. The pathology you won't really get into until next year. For reproductive, the embryology is kind of all over the place. Some of it's in the embryology that shouldn't exist. Some of it is in organ systems specifically. So there's like a neuroembryology section too. For neuroanatomy, this neuroanatomy basic section is you're going to cover most of that. You're going to cover a lot of the ophthalmology, eye structures. There's some stuff in the neuromisc and Kaplan neuroscience. I just kind of wanted to show you how to find the embryology stuff real quick. So if you open up the tags, you go to like first aid, and then GI, phys, embryology, and so like all of this stuff you'll cover during Cade. You can find the embryology subsections on cardio, neuro, and a few of the other ones too. And most of the stuff in those organ-specific embryo sections you'll be responsible for. And for the rest of like the neuroanatomy stuff, I usually start by boards and beyond tags because I think it's a little bit more reasonably laid out. And so you can go into neuro, other, and then neuroembryology right here, and you can do those as you go through. I like to look at the cards in the order created because most of them were made from like review resources or textbooks, and so they'll come in the order that they came in the chapters. So I think looking at them in the order created is very helpful. So this video is just to kind of get you up to speed with how to use Anki. Everything I learned from using Anki, I learned from On King or medical school Anki. When you have time and you're ready to get more in detail with this, I highly recommend checking out the On King's YouTube channel. He has tons of videos, more than you can need, on how to use Anki. I learned most of what I learned from this YouTube channel. Additionally, I recommend checking out the medical school Anki subreddit. You can see the website link here. Sometimes you'll find just some random useful stuff. A lot of new add-ons get posted here. You can see on the side there's a lot of decks here. The On King has a a website on his own that has his deck, an anatomy deck, medical Spanish, lab values, a few things like that. But I highly recommend checking out both of these if you need more details. So that's pretty much it for this video. This is just meant to be a really basic introduction of kind of how to use it at, I don't know, 80% of its most usefulness. Just about everything I learned on the Reddit Med School Anki subreddit or on Anking's YouTube channel. So once you've kind of got down these basics, I highly recommend going to the Anking's YouTube channel and just poking around there, because he goes into a lot of detail about a lot of the add-ons, how Anki works, the kind of theory behind it. And so there's some heady ones if you want to get into that stuff, but he also has a high yield video series which can get you a little bit higher level than this video, but pretty quickly. Anki really changed the way that I study. I wasn't a flashcard person before this, but now I am. I think it's hard to figure out how to use it during CADE while you're adapting to so many new things, but I really think it's worth it. So, maybe play around with it a little bit during CADE if you can. If not, you can play around with it over summer. You can start during M2. There's plenty of time. Just the earlier that you start, the less cards you'll have to do per day, because you'll have it done early. So good luck to everybody.